Hi everybody and welcome to the episode 2 of the Endless Celts STATSDROP. I hope you're all well who's listening, and as always, our show sponsor is Beer 52. You know the drill now. Subscription service, beer52.com/Celts. Claim your case of beer, cover the postage, and then it's a monthly term after that you can cancel anytime. But in terms of the basis of the show, we're going to look back at the Celtic and Motherwell game and the RB Leipzig and Celtic game, both domestically and European. I know we're fresh off a victory yesterday, but our guys are doing a reaction podcast that tomorrow, so it'd be a bit unfair if we crack on and give our take on it. So we'll leave it to the end of Celts lads tomorrow night at 8 o'clock on YouTube. But already in, cooking the chef, Hail, Brian Kelly, Egyptian King, Anthony Donner, very own, and Strange Stuff the Doctor. Good to have you in this early on. But coming to yourself, Tony, mate, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great.
Good, man, good.
I took my daughter to her first away game yesterday, so she got to experience the opposition scoring an injury time, and then Celtic just saying we'll take one of them as well. So she got to experience that atmosphere at the end of the game, so that was good.
Well, she got the experience Celtic doing it the hard way, as usually they always do, you know what I mean? Well, baptism of fire, so to speak. But then we'll have a debut on the show from the Celtic way. Stewart Ross, how are you, buddy?
Yeah, good, mate. Thanks, how are you?
I'm fine. I was looking forward to this all day, to be honest. Like, I was out myself at a restaurant with the family and that, and had a nice meal. As I said to you before we came on there, if there was an XG for eating burgers, I'd be right at the top, like, because I'm absolutely busted. But as I said, we'll get into the premise of the show, and we'll start with the Celtic and Motherwell game. Now, Tony, obviously, myself, as I always make everyone aware, I'm not clued up in stats. This is a learning process for me, as it is for you to involved and everyone watching along. So, again, feel free in the comments to chip in with what you think. Challenges and whatever we say, it's all welcome. But just to give the overall broad stats of a game, we won 2-1 in against Motherwell at home. We had 70% possession, 17 shots, 6 on target, 7 corners, and 10 fouls. What a FIFA way to go about stats, isn't it? That's what you get in FIFA at half time. You get the wee drop down and see what you've done. But in terms of that overall, I mean, a lot of questions have been asked about the attacking side at the moment in terms of lack of goals. Is it a confidence thing? But just broadly speaking, Tony, what are you saying, and what's the stats kind of thrown up at the minute in terms of an attacking sense?
Yeah, so the way I sort of tend to look at a game and look at it, as we talked about, stats and as ever evolving, it helps me look at the game differently now, and will continue to evolve with that as well. So the way I sort of look at a game now is look at sort of 3 parts. The first part is just performance. How was it a good performance? The second part, is there any stylistically about the game, about the style of how we played, or any trends in the game just throughout like the 15-minute spell. So the second part's about, does that tell you anything different or anything unique in the way Celtic are playing, or anything stats? And then the third thing is just players, individual players. Is there anyone that sort of stands out as good or not so good? So for the Motherwell game, there was a lot of angst about the performance. People sort of feeling it wasn't a great performance, but I think for me that was a bit misguided. It was the scoreline of 2-1, and the fact that Hatate's bad pass near the end had people a bit worried. I think that's just maybe fixed it on people's minds too much. Because if you look at the underlying stats for performance, from an XG differential point of view, it was the second best performance of the season. So if you look at the stats, it was 3.39 XG versus 0.28 XG against. So Motherwell didn't really look like scoring, and their only goal was from an error, which I don't know if there's any stats that can back up whether it was Hart's error or Juranovic's error, or a bit of both. You know what I mean? But so yeah, I think the scoreline is worried people. So if we had got 3 or 4 goals like the XG had suggested we would be expected to, or that error didn't happen and Motherwell didn't score, there's no as much negativity coming away from the game. So I think from a performance point of view, I was at the game and it didn't feel the best of performances, but I think the underlying stats would say second best performance on the underlying stats. and it wasn't as bad as people make out. The other thing I look at with XG is post-shot XG. So if you look at the post-shot XG, it was 1.72, which is our second lowest of the season. So the best way I could summarise the performance against Motherwell was it wasn't as bad as people say. We just didn't finish our chances.
I mean, I do want to address one thing in the comments here by Frank Kennedy. Good luck, and get well soon, Frank McGarvey. 100%. Wish him well and his family. Our best wishes from the Endless Celts Podcast go to him, his family, and his friends, and the wider football circle involved with Celtic Football Club. But coming back to you, Tony, in terms of what you were saying there about the Motherwell game.
Get well, Frank. I was speaking to him a few weeks ago in the penalty spot. We had a good chat with him, so good bit to get well soon, Frank.
Yeah, 100%. We're all behind that one, Tony. But in terms of the match itself, I mean, from my point of view, I watch games with my grandfather, who's a regular watcher along here with us on the podcast, and it didn't look to me a pretty game as the XG suggests, as you said it did. Our second best performance. So what do you take from? Does that prove sometimes that the whole XG thing can be wrong, or is it more of a course of over a period of time that becomes correct? What way does that work then?
Yeah, so XG is probably it's designed to be measured on a long-term basis. Do you know what I mean? So even on a long-term basis, that it's still not an exact science. Do you know what I mean? It's a guide. So over an individual game, it's going to be more likely to have a bigger variance. But even with that, if you looked at the XG, say that Celtic performed better, but the post-shot XG would say they just didn't finish the chances. So from a performance point of view, we dominated the game, we created chances, we restricted Motherwell's chances, we just didn't take our chances. I think that was the best way to summarise it. Just the finishing boots weren't on the day. Kyogo had, it was 2.2, I think it was, XG on the game, and we just didn't finish our chances. And I think that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, it was one of them games that a couple of years back probably would have been the no luck story, where you're hitting all the shots but not getting the goals. I know we got 2 goals then and won the game, Stuart. And what Tony's saying there, I mean, the whole XG thing is quite interesting to know that's the second best performance in terms of that stat of the whole league campaign. But I know, broadly speaking, you're going to be talking about the RB Leipzig game in more detail. But what do you think about what Tony said there in terms of that Motherwell game?
Yes, there's context, because obviously we had the defeat at St Mirren. You've got a long international break. First game back, Motherwell going quite well. They were probably, I think, underperforming in terms of XG, X points, stuff like that. So yeah, it was just one of those. If that's in the middle of a kind of a heavy schedule, it's a midweek game, you just go right, tick, move on. But there was so much else going on, like that. Like I say, I had that 2-week break. And all that, and it's understandable people are a bit edgy, but yeah, I mean, Motherwell were 0.28 XGs, but like Tori was saying, like it was really, it's hard obviously because we're all fans and you're watching it and you get nervous and that, but when you watch it back after, when it probably wasn't that. Even after Hatate, sells McGregor short and you get the red, there probably wasn't really anything even after that, was there? So. Yeah, I think it's always putting context on top of these things as well. So, yeah, like I say, it was a big break. Obviously, first time the season's dropped points just before the international break. Everyone's got 2 weeks to stew on it. You come back, and again, you might be thinking there might be a bad drop points at Tynecastle at lunchtime before. So, yeah, that obviously didn't work out at all. So, yeah, I think that's maybe where I think the kind of people's perception of that game came from. Like I say, I think if it's in the middle of a run, it's just you just tick off and say, look, well, like Cliff said, just didn't have our shooting boots on. But if somebody takes 1 or 2 of these, then it's absolute, it's a pretty comfortable afternoon. But yeah, that just a few kind of different bits and pieces going on, which maybe just kind of reminds you that you need to put context on top of these things as well, just not look at them purely on the numbers. That there's always other factors going on that influence the way people see it.
I think as Stuart said, you've got to have the 3 things, and you've got the result, you've got the advanced stats that you can look into help, and then you've got to go with what you see as well. That's the third thing, just what you see, because at the game, exactly as Stuart said, at the game I was like, you could tell the players looked just a little bit as St Mirren hangover was still in their mind. It was you could just sort of feel as if it was a bit of nervousness. I did look to see if there was any stats to back that up, as in less passes, so it wasn't as much passes or passing accuracy maybe down, but nothing really shone through. But that doesn't mean you say it's not there, because you could tell at the game that there did feel that a little bit of nervousness still there.
Yeah, I think when watching it from my point of view, it did seem like that. It took me about 15 minutes to get a stream that worked. It was a shambles that day. I was raging, proper angry, not being able to get it the full 90, but I caught up with most of it. But in terms of that, Tony, there was obviously the defensive fault, and there's been a few recently. And we'll talk about this one. That was between Juranovic and Joe Hart. Now, I asked you to look at Ralston per se in terms of stats and things like that. There was a lot of clamour after this game to maybe drop Juranovic and give Ralston a chance. He came in yesterday, obviously, at McDermott Park against the Johnson. But in terms of Juranovic himself too, we were talking about it on Friday. I think personally he's dropped from what he was doing. He doesn't seem to be getting in the right positions, especially coming into the inverted centre midfield kind of role that Postecoglou likes, and his link-up play and his touch just seems a bit off. Is there anything coming through? It sounds like a seance there, doesn't it? I thought it was a most haunted. But is there anything shining through in terms of stats there that you should be concerned about, or is it just a drop of form?
I've got like the Juranovic versus Ralston stats. No realize he's got Juranovic versus last year, so don't know about any drop off. I can always look into that. I know you get some in the camp that Ralston should be getting a game, and I've heard lots of comments of that. You've got other ones who are saying that Juranovic is a different level and it's not even a competition. I'm probably more in the middle, where I think it should still be Juranovic, but I don't think there's as big a gap as the pro Juranovic camp sort of think there is. But I still think Juranovic is that better player. But the stats actually, right back's a hard one to look at stats. See if you're a forward or you're a creative player, you're looking at XA, XG, crosses, passing, etc. When you're a right back, you're part of a back four and how many goals you concede and things like that. So it's quite hard individually. But I did look at some, and the ones I looked at, so passing accuracy. So, and this is just for this season, so Ralston's is only really a couple of games. But if you look at per 90 for all these stats, so passing accuracy, Juranovic 85.2, Ralston 86.2. So one of the things that, from an eye point of view, you wouldn't necessarily put Ralston above Juranovic for that, but key passes per game, Ralston 2.4 versus 1.7 Juranovic. Passes per 90, 79 for Ralston, 59 for Juranovic. Tackles, Ralston 2.9 versus 1.4, and an 83% success versus 71% Juranovic. Interceptions, 1 for Ralston versus 0.7. Clearances, 4.3 versus 1. Even long balls and short balls, etc. Crosses, 5.3 versus 2.8, and a success rate of 55% versus 32. Fouls, Ralston's got a bit more, 1.4 versus 0.1. But actually, sometimes, like a game in Germany, I don't think Ralston would have been a massive change on the team, because I know people talk about Juranovic blamed for the first goal. I wasn't necessarily in that camp, because I think it's just the speed, do you know what I mean, of who he's up against. But where I would see the difference is through the game, Ralston might have that physical presence and just let the forwards know they're there a little bit. The only other bit is your XA per 90, Ralston's 0.31 versus Juranovic 0.24. But the thing that stuck out for me when I was looking at Ralston, this is something I looked at sort of last year. So Ralston last year was 0.36 assists per 90, which was fourth in the league. All the players in the league, forwards, everywhere, it was fourth in the league at 0.36. That's unbelievable. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What he had last year. So you could make an argument based on the stats, but as I say, that's not everything. That Ralston could come in and do a job. But I noticed there was someone on Twitter yesterday saying bring in Ralston to play Juranovic in McGregor's position. There's obviously a shout in there, but so no, I think Ralston's a player that I really like, and I think he's got something to offer. But I would probably still be in the Juranovic as the first pick.
See, that's quite interesting. I mean, you're into your stats, Tony, and every stat you named, Big Ralston was coming out in top. Now, Stuart, I'll come to you for this one. From me hearing them numbers, right, and there's people in the chat saying what's going on. It's all about obviously defensive stats and expected assists and clearances, pass accuracy, that type of thing. As you always say, it's a learning process myself. So just hang with it. But Stuart, I mean, when you look at that and I hear them stats, what that's saying to me is Ralston, even though personal preference, it's Juranovic, but going by stats, Ralston should be first pick. Is that not the way that should work?
No. It's like I kind of touched on there. It's like we've touched already. It's not just the numbers, it's the whole kind of, does Ralston fit the system as well as Juranovic? That's maybe kind of cliche thing to say, but do you know what? I think a few people have mentioned it before in terms of Postecoglou is always going to want the fullbacks to come inside, do the inverted stuff. Just don't. I think Ralston has done it, and he's done it a few times already this season. Come in and played some really nice balls in behind as well. But I don't know if he's quite got it. It's an eye test kind of thing that he's just not quite on the same level as Ralston in terms of technical ability.
Can I push back on that one? I mean, you're saying they're obviously the inverted fullback and that type of thing, but Tony gave me his passing accuracy, and he's ahead of Juranovic. So how does that not say he doesn't fit the system? If I'm not trying to obviously question everything, but I'm just wanting to know.
Yeah, no. That's, I suppose that, Tony, that would just be general passes. Yeah.
Well, I do have it for long balls and short balls as well.
Yeah,
but it's all context as well. Ralston's games are against St Johnstone, St Mirren. Do you know what I mean? Juranovic has got a game against Rangers there, Aberdeen, etc. So it's all context. Do you know what I mean? If you want some stats, there's some stats, but they don't tell you everything.
Yeah.
Aye, but what I'm saying, Stuart, is right. I know it's against St Johnstone, St Mirren, but that's fair enough, right? And Monty comes in, I have big balls. I'm sure you do, big son. But I mean, you look at it, Stuart, as well, and I'm just trying to get them ahead. I'm not trying to create a fuss or anything in terms of that, but what the data as you guys like to look into is saying to me that Ralston is ahead of Juranovic, right? And I know for fine well in the system, he works in it because, I mean, Giakoumakis loves playing with him in terms of his cross balls, and he links on really well with Bada. So why do you think, Stuart, that he's still behind Juranovic?
I don't know exactly what I think. He is just that, again, not repeat, but the stats don't tell you everything. Like you said, I'd probably want to maybe go away and look at it a bit more in terms of more advanced kind of progressive passes and other types of passes and just general ones, because you can get your pass accuracy up by just playing it inside the centre back every time. It's an easy ball, but it's those, and like you say, Ralston can do it as well. He's shown he can do it. But in terms of right now, I'm not 100% sure. I need to probably look at it in a bit more detail. But I don't think it's anyone can say Juranovic is playing as well as he was last season. That's probably fair, but I still don't think there's. I think there's, based on yesterday and trying not to step on your guys' toes for a bit, I think there's a shorter gap in terms of the level between Taylor and Bernabei than there is between Juranovic and Ralston. Even the stats, it's one of those ones that's probably the eye test. But yeah, like I say, I probably need to go away and look at it in a bit more detail. But I think it probably comes down to that technical ability, maybe fitting the system better, and suitability. Like you said, Ralston maybe just looks at them and goes, yeah, I've got two good fullbacks. Maybe there's an argument one is better than the other, one is better than the other on stats, one is better than the other maybe on the eye. But maybe you just think Juranovic is better suited for the bigger games, for European football, whereas Ralston, in terms of that, you make an argument potentially better physicality, so he's better suited to playing, the domestic games at the weekend. So that'd be kind of guessing.
we said earlier about, like, so you've got actual results, then you've got underlying stats, then you've got what your eye tells you. That's three things. I think the fourth one is always your personal bias as well. So your personal bias is, it comes in. If you're a Ralston fan, you'll look at that physicality as a positive. If you're a Juranovic fan, you'll look at that positioning and you'll favour that. So you'll all have that personal bias as well. As I say, my gut feel, I do like Ralston. My gut feeling is that Juranovic has got that little bit more. How do you define that? I don't know, because I know, as Stuart said, about different types of passes, but even on the long balls, he's averaging 11.4 versus Juranovic 5.8, and accuracy is 50 versus 43. So even when you keep going into Ralston, because you would think Ralston offers different things to Juranovic, but you wouldn't expect the passing accuracy to be best. Just looking from an eye point of view, you wouldn't expect it. So, it's a good question and a good debate, Stephen. So,
I think as well, like, what it does show, I mean, Ralston's rise from when he got offered that 1 year deal is kind of a stopgap. He's took that opportunity and he's proven himself as, again, a good choice or alternative to Juranovic if he's injured or needs a rest. So, I mean, in terms that is good, two options to have. But to kind of come back to you, Tony, the era that happened between him and Joe Hart, and Joe Hart is a matter of focus as well. What do you think happened there? And in terms of Joe Hart's recent performances, can you see anything in that? Because in my opinion, watching him, I don't know what it is. There's a few mistakes he's made. Obviously, the RB Leipzig game when he had, I don't know what he had, water in his eyes or something, trying to play that pass. It was crazy. But is there anything coming to you from that sense?
Yeah, again, goalkeeper stats are even harder than sort of right back stats. And you traditionally you look at clean sheets or goal conceded, but you've got some better ones now. But again, it's still limited. Regards the error, who do you blame more, Hart or Juranovic? I think both of them have got to take blame. Who takes the more? I don't know. Maybe you look at the goalkeeper because they've got to be shouting and commanding. But I think both of them. So with regards to overall, my view is, one, I don't necessarily think Hart should be dropped just now, and two, I don't think he should definitely be dropped. I definitely don't think he should be dropped for a bad pass, one bad pass in a game. But I do think we should definitely, as a club, be looking at, right, when's the time do we upgrade on Hart? Not just drop him for performance. Say thanks for performance. He's done well. He's come in. He's been steady, and a keeper we needed to be steady, as well as all the intangible stuff, the leadership he brings. But we definitely need to be looking, because I like the look of Abelgard on the stats, and I actually like the look of his physicality and he's breaking up the play. But it's going to be hard to come into the team because our deep lying midfielder needs to create a lot, because our two centre halves aren't ball playing centre halves, and our goalkeeper isn't a ball playing goalkeeper. So if we had a ball playing goalkeeper and ball playing centre halves, we might get away with playing Abelgard and centre defensive midfield, which we might need to help, because we can be weak at defending and supporting the centre backs. With regards to stats, so looking at a save percentage, so shots against and shots saved, 76.2% is top, and he was third last year. And a better start would be in looking at the post-shot XG and how many goals you've conceded, because that's looking at averages of what is expected after the shots. So it's a good goalkeeping measure. And he's prevented, he's actually let in one more than expected. So he's fifth for that. And last season, he let in 0.6 less than expected, but that was fifth again. So mid-table for that. So if there's anybody want to have a go at Hart, they could maybe use their stats. The one that I would want to just say about passing accuracy, he's second in the whole league at 92.7 for the season. There's only one player above him who's had limited minutes. It's King for Rangers, but he's 92.7% for the season. And last season he was ninth in the best goalkeeper. But so I think he was 93 or something like that. 94% I think against Leipzig, and the Leipzig goalkeepers were like 65 and 80 or something. I can't remember, but they were a lot lower. So from passing, this whole thing about passing from the back, yeah, he made a bad error, and in that situation, if you've got nobody to pass to, you've got to go long. But I think sometimes we can overreact with that, because the Leipzig keeper doing a far bigger mistake when the first goal for Shakhtar in their game, when Schwed got a tap in from 30 yards. So I'm of the camp that might be overreacting a little bit on his passing side and the mistakes. And he's actually done some good saves against Leipzig. But I do think stylistically, we definitely need to be looking at upgrading, and that should at the very least in the summer, if not in the January window. And that could be just a young goalkeeper who's got all the skills and attributes that we want, but we need to just bed him in. And Hart's ideal to keep the place and bed him in. But when we signed Siegrist, it didn't look like it, because Siegrist is just stylistically not that keeper we're looking for. A good goalkeeper, but not that one you're looking to say, he's going to upgrade and he'll bed in. So, I think it's a good challenge for the supporters to say that we need to upgrade on Hart, but I don't think he necessarily needs dropped.
I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot of chatter on my podcast, Stuart, for Siegrist. Now, not from the individuals who do the podcast for myself, but viewers and even myself as well. Can you see the clamour for that? Or again, Tony's come up with obviously the stats there, and albeit he's fifth in some of his stats, which isn't that good as average, and then he was top for the save. Was that save percentage he was top for?
Yeah, save percentage, yeah.
Yeah, so he's pulling off saves and that, but there has to be, I mean, from my eye, there has been mistakes. I mean, that's clear to see, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth, it's still pretty early in the season, maybe looking at in another, there's another couple of games where you look at maybe a couple of shots you're going to go, could have done better there, maybe then you could have a look at it. But like Tony says, Siegrist is very similar. It's a very similar profile. He's not going to, unless Joe Hart is really, dropping off in terms of what he brings, which is the shot stopping. That's just kind of, then there's not too much sense in it, because if you do it, then you're breaking kind of continuity in the back line. I think that would be a problem. So yeah, it's like Tony says, it's thinking a longer term. I think for now, Hart's still fine, unless the shot stopping drops off even more, or other kind of parts of his game. We know he's not great with the ball at his feet. He tries his best. He admits that he knows it's not a strength of him, but he'll try it. He'll stick to the philosophy that the manager wants. So yeah, I think now I don't really see much point in it, but it's that longer term picture. It's identifying somebody now that can try and bring in the summer and have a kind of a season of bedding in. With Hart still there, Siegrist is maybe a 3, and then somebody that's obviously better suited to the style of play the manager's going to want to play as well. But I think it'd be harsh on Hart just now. And let's say there's not enough upside to that just now if the alternative is Siegrist.
Stuart said it's longer term, because it was surprising signing Siegrist and also giving Bain an extended contract. Do you know what I mean? And they things. Whereas if you'd have brought, and Stuart says, someone who can come in as second choice but eventually get there, and maybe Siegrist or Bain as third choice there. But Toby Oluyemi from the B team has got the attributes to be what we want in the future, but he is young for a goalkeeper. Do you know what I mean? And maybe he is that good. He's England under 19 goalkeeper. Do you know what I mean? Maybe he is that good that they do see him challenging for Hart's position in the not too distant future. But you don't see any evidence of that.
Yeah, I think as well, this is frightening. Gary Melrose is a frequent commenter on our podcast, and he does love the stats as well. He often comes in speaking about them, and Barcasa's stats were better defending the box and passing out, but occasionally a goalkeeper has to save a shot as well. That's kind of interesting to see that in terms of what his stats could bring and what he could have done if he actually turned out to be a decent goalkeeper, Tony.
Barcasa's stats were if you take out shot stopping, Barcasa's stats were really good. Crosses, coming for crosses, commanding the box, etc., etc. And even if he was just an average or an above average shot stopper, there might have even been a case for giving him a chance. But he's probably the worst shot stopper I've ever seen in my life. And and even if he was elite level for everything else, you have to even be even in your weakest point, just okay or average. Do you know what I mean? Especially short.
I think he was part of the team that knocked us out of the Champions League qualifier one time with Athens, the Greek team he was at before he joined us. But we'll kind of round that off. And a game of 1-2-1. It was interesting debate there, Tony, but we're around a few roads there. Quite good in getting the people watching along involved as well. Although there's still probably, I'd say, about 40% of the commenters have no idea what we're speaking about. But as I said, it's a learning process, and people are just listening along and trying to get with it. Like myself, by the way, people who are watching, I'm learning as we're going along. But Stuart, I'll come to you first here. We're going to cover the RB Leipzig game. We lost 3-1, and my opinion on this, I mean, in our podcast on Friday, I said we were terrible from my point of view. I thought, much like the Shakhtar game, I know chance-wise it was probably up there with what we created against the Shakhtar team and things like that, but the whole system at times for me looked disjointed. We looked as if we weren't as a cohesive unit as we always like to be on the rounds. There was gaps between defence, midfield and attackers, and they were picking us off at will at times. I mean, in a broad sense, Stuart, why do you think that happened? Because usually we see an Anne's team and we're pressing in packs, we're closing teams down, and it just seemed like from my naked eye that it just didn't work against Leipzig.
Yeah, it was just two big gaps in between the lines. So, it was always well intentioned and at times pretty well executed, the pressing. But if the rest of the kind of the midfield unit's not coming up, and if Jens and Welsh are, not holding the high line that they need to hold to make the whole pressing thing work, then it doesn't matter how good if they get through that first line, which Leipzig are a good team. You're playing at the top level. You're going to have to accept that they're going to break your press no matter how good it is. At some point, you then have to be able to deal with that next phase, and the gaps were just far too big, and that was the main issue. Like I say, just disjointed. But in terms of performance-wise overall, and talk about XG and stuff, up until I think at half time it was roughly even in terms of XG. I think roughly about one each, and then we get the goal just after half time, and that's from that point. That was about 50 minutes or something. Jota scored. We've got one more attempt at goal the rest of the game, and it's a 0.04 XG shot from Jota on the 75th minute. So again, much like the Real Madrid game, it probably wasn't as good a performance tactically, but up until that point, in terms of the underlying looking at the XG, it was as good. It was another good 60 minutes, but it's 90 minutes you've got to play for, and after that, we've Leipzig have put up another 2 XG between there and the end of the game, probably about 1.5 between that and the end of the game. We've put up nothing. So, yeah, I think there was issues tactically, and I think, again, and like Real Madrid as well, it's keeping that that pressing going for the full game. It's well intentioned, but you've got to pick your moments, and maybe we're just too eager at times, and we're getting to 60 minutes and we can't keep it going. And if we've got those tactical issues as well, then that's kind of, I think we're well beaten in the end. I think it was 11 shots at goal inside Celtic's box in that game. So give up that amount to any team in Champions League, you're not going to go really far. And Andre Silva had 9 shots himself. His personal XG was 1.32. So really good for probably not as good as Real Madrid, but really good for an hour, similar to Real Madrid. But then the last half hour was just kind of falling away, and I suppose that's what the task will be for them. How do we stay in the games longer? Because the stuff we're doing for that first hour is really good. We're taking the game to them. Seeing when we scored the goal, but just after half time we're still in the game. But it's how you put a full 90-minute performance and in the Champions League. And got to remember, this team's first time in the Champions League. So Ange Postecoglou's first season in the Champions League. So they're all learning, and it's a tough environment. So I'd rather we were trying to do it that way than sitting in and just try to break. That is the way I think most Celtic fans would want us to approach it. But yeah, it's how we get those tweaks that take it to the next level and turn pretty decent performances into results.
Yeah, I think as well, like what you said there was quite telling. The 60-minute mark, Tony, it seems to be the issue in Europe. Real Madrid done the exact same thing. They kind of, obviously, on a bigger scale, in my opinion, world-class players just took us apart in the end. Gary Melrose comes in, I think it's an interesting. The attack was too quick to press, and that then passed through the spaces. Need to pick and choose when the press quality teams. I think that is an issue, as Stuart rightly said there. The eagerness sometimes comes across, and you see O'Reilly pressing, Kyogo's doing it, the wingers are doing it, and then you just have Kalmack protecting the back four, and it was a massive gap at times. But and also the coming to you as well, the attacking side of things, as Stuart rightly said, we were doing well in the first half. We did have a few chances. We got the goal from doing what Postecoglou wants Celtic to do in terms of winning the ball high up, Kyogo picking Jota out and scoring. But for me, there was just loads of issues in that game, and I thought it was a game, for my opinion, that was winnable. What did the stats say for that?
Yeah, so there's two big things I've took from this, and I put two articles on my Celtic Transit today in relation to this, and the second point sort of is aligned with the first. So the first is, I've looked at the XG for both the Celtic Madrid game and the Celtic Leipzig game from 0 to 55, and then from 55 to the end of the game. So against Madrid, from 0 to 55, it's 0.86 Celtic and 0.7 Real Madrid. So Celtic are ahead 0.16 on XG for that first 55 minutes. And then against Leipzig, it's where am I? I've lost. It's 0.91 for Celtic to 0.42 for Leipzig, a 0.49 differential. So up to 55 minutes, Celtic, if you look at XG being the performance, I know it's just one game and it's not everything, but just for the purpose of this exercise, look at XG as accurate for everything and it's a performance. For both games, after 55 minutes, we're outperforming Real Madrid and we're outperforming Leipzig. So you say to yourself, again, two quality teams, that's outstanding. But when you look at the next 50, so 55 to 90, there's a 0.75 differential against Madrid and a 1.81 differential against Leipzig. And on my piece, I've done a pro-rated it for 90 minutes as well. So not to 55 pro-rated and 55 to 90 pro-rated. And there's a massive swing in Celtic's performance between 0 to 55 and then from 55 to the end of the game. And then, so that's the first thing that jumps out, really jumps out at 55. And it probably goes the opposite way against Shakhtar. We improve our differential. But what we find against Shakhtar, we had the most possession, whereas against Real Madrid and Leipzig, they had the most possession.
Yeah. So
we're being outpossessed, and we're outperforming in 0 to 55. So the first question is why? What's happened there? And then to Stuart's point about the presses and things like that. So I looked at pressures. So out of all the 32 teams in the Champions League, after the first three games, Celtic are 7th for most presses per game. But Celtic are 8th bottom out of that 32 for successful presses a game. So Celtic are pressing really high, loads and loads of presses compared to all the other teams, but they're actually not effective. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So one, you're pressing a lot, which is going to make you tired. You're actually not winning the ball, so you're chasing it a bit more. You're making you tired. And also onto that as well, where the presses are getting done. So for presses in the final third, Celtic are second to Liverpool on presses in the final third. So all the presses are actually coming in the final third as well. And that's when Stuart talks about the gap between the final third and the middle third. Whereas you look at Leipzig, in our game against us, the majority of their presses came in the middle third. So for me, that was very interesting to see that actually we've got the most presses, but one of the worst performers for successful presses. and their presses are coming in the final third. And the only thing that jumps out is if players are just tired after 55 minutes, the team is just tired, and it's not sustainable when you're being outpossessed.
Yeah, I think as well, like Stuart, what Tony says there makes a lot of sense, because when you watch it on, obviously for me on the TV and stuff like that, we do press a lot. Kyogo's like the main kind of trigger, and then you got the likes of Yada, Abada, whoever's playing on the wings, kind of following. Aurelie's behind, trying to cover off their defensive midfielder as well. So there is a lot of pressing. But again, you talked about tweaking the system a wee bit, Stuart, to get them final results. And Gary Melrose comes in. Progress for me is longer periods of dominance and taking our chances. Within a couple of campaigns, we should be able to compete or be able to last 90 minutes and control games. That's all well and good. I do agree with that, but I want to kind of have success this season, and that's why I'm a wee bit kind of frustrated. I know, like you're laughing there to be like, calm down, we'll get there. But a lot of the guys do as well on the podcast and stuff. But I know against Shakhtar, I thought it was 2 points dropped. We could have took advantage of the chances we had. Leipzig, as I said, was a winnable time. In my opinion, they were going through a period of transition with their new manager Rose as well. So there's a lot of variables there. But back to the pressing as well. Tony said that RB Leipzig done a lot of theirs in the middle third, and it worked for them in terms of breaking through our lines and getting up the pitch quicker and faster with 1 or 2 passes. Do you think Celtic could take a wee bit away from that and maybe get a bit more streetwise in European football?
Yes. I mean, I'm just looking at some broad stats, not the full detail, and I'm not an expert by any manner of means. But if you were to take on the knowledge and on the stuff I've seen, you would say that Celtic don't need to change a lot. They just tweak some things. So maybe still press as much as but just be more selective when they're pressing, choosing the presses, and also, could they think about pressing from the middle third or a little bit deeper than the final third? That's just a couple of little tweaks. The other thing you've got to take into consideration is as well, Celtic performed well in they not to 55 minutes, but only scored 1 goal really in they both games. So if Celtic take their chances in they not to 55 minutes when we've been pressing and we've been performing better, if Celtic take the chances, it might be a totally different game then.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Stuart? I mean, again, you look at it, and me personally, like I thought he made his substitutions too late. Their manager rotated the team in about the 60th minute. He would have did the 70th. Hans Postecoglou talking about the players were dead on their feet. I think the confidence was sucked from them as well. What in terms of stats and pressing, did anything jump out at you that maybe we could have done differently in that game?
I don't think so. It's like Tony saying, if you get a bit of luck, you get 1 or 2 goals, or like you take the Real Madrid game, for example, Cal McGregor shot that goes off the post. If that goes in, that was half an hour in or something, totally changes the dynamic of the game. It's a lot, if you're 60, 70 minutes and you're 1 down, you're pressing, that's a lot harder than if you're, 1 up and you can kind of manage the games, you can start being more selective in that press, you can kind of fall back a bit. So, yeah, it comes down to moments. But in terms of press, I think, I don't know the numbers right in front of me, but I think in general terms, our pressing across the board is kind of less than it was last season. And that's been talked about in a few places. And there's that we are trying to be selective in terms of games. And again, you see yesterday, Kyogo not getting any game time, Jota coming off at half time, trying to save our best players so that they're at their optimum for the biggest games. I think that is kind of what he's trying to do. And if things have maybe fallen slightly better, been on the better side of luck in a few of these games, it might have been a totally different picture. It's fine margins, in Champions League, absolutely fine margins. So, yeah, I think pressing, I think we can definitely be better in terms of how we're actually doing it. And I think we can be, like Tony says, probably more selective in when we're doing it.
The other thing to take into for Leipzig as well is, I think a couple of things. One is, I think as fans we underestimated them. The Shakhtar game we took as Leipzig are playing poor. That was a bit of a freak game, the Shakhtar game. Shakhtar 5 shots at goal, 4 goals, a goalkeeping error and a deflection to start them off. So there's that. The other thing about going back to the pressing, Leipzig's 2 centre halves are in the top 5 for passes per game. The whole of the Bundesliga players, their two centre halves are in the top 5. So that's two centre halves that know how to pass the ball. Leipzig as a high pressing team will know about how a team will press, etc. So they are probably, from a stylistic point of view, one of the hardest teams we can come up against. It's just, and go back to sort of expectations. If you look at expected position in the league, in the group, we're fourth pot, we're fourth seeds. So expected positions fourth. So if we get third, we've overperformed.
Aye, don't be saying that, Tony. Do not be saying that. I want to go for second place is what I want. You know, I mean, third place, fair enough, but you want to raise that bar.
If we win on Tuesday and we beat Shakhtar, well, as long as Real Madrid win all their games, then we'll get second.
Well, I mean, 100%. I do get what you're saying about that. I mean, we discussed it Friday. I just don't like the whole issue of relying on us banking our 6 points at home. We need to be challenging away from home as much as we haven't been in recent years. We need to be taking results and taking our chances when they come to us. And you spoke about their centre halves, Tony. Now, Stuart, our centre halves in that game were Welsh and Jens. I think you spoke about Champions League margins. For me, personally, they don't belong there. What's your opinion on that one, Stuart?
Well, they're third and fourth choice, probably. So, in an ideal situation, the rotational options, you're not going to be relying on both of them to play every game in a Champions League campaign, but that's what's happened in terms of injuries. So, yeah, but it's harsh to say they don't belong at that level. Celtic belong at that level because we won the league and, you know, we're there on merit. So, in terms of Welsh, it's a tricky one. I think it's because there's been so many injuries in terms of, you know, Starfield didn't start the season, then he come in, he's got injured again. Carter Vickers has picked up a knock. Jens has just came in not super late, but relatively late, integrating him. There's been a lot of chopping and changing, not just in terms of partnerships, but Welsh playing right centre-back, playing left centre-back. That's a total change for a centre-back in terms of, you know, the angles that they can pick passes and stuff like that. So, of course, it's not ideal, but to be honest, I don't know what you guys think. I didn't think either of them were. I think Welsh has probably had poor games in the Scottish Premiership this season. I think Jens has been fine. He's been steady. I don't think he's been too spectacular. But in terms on the night, I didn't think they were particularly, you know, anything for what they are for third and fourth choice. They weren't too bad, essentially.
At the end of the game, I was in Leipzig, and at the end of the game, I was watching Welsh, and he had to be sort of helped up. He was absolutely knackered. And I think when you go into his stats, and I was talking about right back earlier on, when you look at individual centre backs, it's hard to put it all on them when it's a whole team performance. And as we talked about pressing and things like that, it's hard to put it on them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think I mentioned earlier in terms of being a bit braver in terms of trusting the system to go that bit higher. Because I think that was the issue that Welsh and Jens were probably understandably scared of the threat in behind the likes of Werner and Nkunku. But yeah, it's been braver in terms of their positioning, and I think for Welsh and just in general, there's obviously, because there was chat that there was an opportunity that there was bids for him over the summer that he could have moved them on. Postecoglou maybe sees there is something there, and I think we've seen he is good on the ball, he can, but it's everything else, and that, like you say, like Toy says, he's coming off his act, because that's the highest level, and you know and he's still a young player, so yeah, I wouldn't be overly critical, but it's understandable that people can maybe get frustrated seeing that. But in an ideal situation, that's Carter Vickers and Starfield that are there. But it's unfortunate. There's not much you can do about that. Injuries are going to happen.
As Stuart said about that sort of pushing the line, and you see that on the sort of average formation line by 15 minutes, the 45 to 60 when it really dropped back. And that's what Andy said in his comments. He says we can feel the goal coming. We've scored the goal, and it's maybe just being a bit of panic. And as you say, that's probably the bit you could be critical. We just defended too deep and just panicked then.
Yeah, I think as well. I think I've seen a stat, funny enough, that Stephen Welsh had a really good kind of solid game in terms of interceptions and tackles won and that type of stuff. I think he was highest for us, obviously, compared to the ends. But to come back to you, Tony, I mean, maybe myself, I'm a bit of a knee-jerk reaction guy, and you kind of, you know already, I know why you're laughing, but you kind of watch these games and you kind of make reactions off the cuff. And watching that partnership for me, it was, I thought, this is what I mean when I say disjointed. I thought that one of them was pushing high, they weren't kind of talking to each other, it seemed like there was no communication, they were both really wide. But do you think that changes as well? I'm going off a wee bit of a tangent here, but do you think that changes when Vickers comes in? That one of them could play alongside him, for example, and look better? Because Carter Vickers himself is our best centre half, so effectively he should rub off on someone like them.
Absolutely, because a lot of these stats are you're measuring an individual, and it's like who they're playing alongside. We talked about this a fortnight ago when we were talking about Moy, and yet all of Moy's time was never with playing alongside Hatate and O'Reilly, our two best other players. So that's unfair to judge Moy. So it's the same judging Welsh alongside Jens and Jens alongside Welsh. You want to measure their performance when they're alongside the best centre half, Carter Vickers. So I thought Jens was okay when I first seen him at the start of the season. I thought he would be pushing maybe Starfelt for that second position, but he seems to be sort of going backwards a bit from the start.
Yeah, I mean, we'll kind of round it off. Obviously, we lost the European game, but we kind of want to talk about Greg Taylor. We'll do a wee bit of player focus as well. And I think Stewart, his kind of rise, again, much like Ralston, is brilliant to see. I mean, Postecoglou's referred to him as like a leader within the camp. Obviously, Callum McGregor is injured. Well, he's going to be injured out until after the World Cup. Hopefully, he'll be back. But you look at Greg Taylor, I mean, myself personally, and John, who's on the podcast, we're always saying we could do better than him and do all that type of stuff. But maybe at the moment, he's the best we can get, and he's doing a good job, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. And he has taken his game to a level. Some of his numbers are up on last season. So, yeah, I took a look at a couple of things on Taylor. So, comparing, on StatsBomb, he's 8.3. So, he's 740 odd minutes of league football this season compared to 20 odd games last season. And some of these bits and pieces are up. So, looked at deep progressions. So, that's from StatsBomb. That's a combination of passes, dribbles, and carries into the opposition third. So this was before this weekend's game. So looked at this kind of the end of last week. So for every Scottish Premiership player that's played a minimum of 300 minutes, Taylor's got the most. So in terms of his importance to the progression from the back and how he absolutely, he's probably one of the first ones that really took to the system in terms of that inverted role and coming inside. It just suits his game because he was never, as a traditional fullback, he was never going to, a lot of people's issues with him, that he was never going to take his man on, he was never going to get to the byline and whip a cross in. The system that Postecoglou's put in when he's come in just has suited Taylor to absolute T, and he was good last season, and he's good again this season, and like I say, the numbers coming up. So he was 10.37, 8.20 deep progressions per 90 last season, and that's up at 10. And like I say, that based on the end of last week, that was the most of any Scottish Premiership player. In terms of another one, XG build-up, so that's beyond XG. Unfortunately, that's going to make it even more complicated. I don't even know if I want to go down this road, but anyway,
Go for it.
Expected XG build up is trying to take, so you get XG for that's your shots, you get expected assists, or the StatsBomb, it's XG assisted, that's your assist. So XG build up and XG chain, there's another slightly different one, tries to put a value on everyone that's involved in that move up until the shot. So take away the shot and take away the assist from that move. Who's involved, who's making that third and fourth pass, who's making those passes that are breaking the lines, that kind of thing. So Taylor's up on that from last season again. He's 1.24. That's the fourth highest in the league. The other three are Celtic players, Hatate, Abada, and actually Jens. So Jens has been good progressing the ball from the back as well. So that's just another one. In terms of these other stats are kind of much the same, but those two kind of jumped out because obviously they're about ball progression. They're about, that he is really important in how we build up play coming into that inverted role. And I think I'd look on Y Scout as well. So they've got a metric second assist. So that is literally the last pass before the pass or the action that creates the shot. So he had 5 of them in all competitions last season. He's got 4 of them already this season. So that was, he had 2 at Ross County. He had the one in the derby against that Matt O'Reilly kind of directed onto Abad at the back post, and he had Kelly away, which was a kind of perfect example. Came right in field, right in the line. Jens turned and put it in behind for Maeda to run on to pass for Kyogo. So yeah, interesting. Obviously, again, trying not to step on toes about your guys tomorrow about yesterday's game. But I thought Bernabeu was quite good yesterday, so it's just interesting that we've brought in, and again, you putting it, coming back to the Juranovic-Ralston thing, like I say, I think Bernabeu's, he's not had the impact in the first 11, but he's clearly had an impact on Taylor. Like, he's had to raise his game because he's taken a bit of time to settle. Understandably, he's a young player from South America. It's going to take a bit of time, but he's obviously got a lot of qualities. He looks quicker. He looks like he will have the potential to play that role effectively as well in terms of coming inside, and he done that probably more than Ralston did yesterday. So yeah, interesting one. And talking about leadership, that's an intangible, not one you can put a number on, but yeah, really important, especially with Callum McGregor being out. He's really taking on a leadership role in that team. It's clear to see.
Yeah, I think in my podcast we all refer to him as Gregory. So the Gregory Taylor, so he is a good player, Tony. And there's a comment here as well about his performance in European football by Gary Melrose, that the Leipzig fullback on Winger exposed Taylor's physical limitations and height and speed. Still an excellent fullback, but needs cover against lightning fast monsters. Of course, there's still room for improvement in him. But I think what Stuart said there, like all them stats, he's really high up. He's first in some areas. I think when Postecoglou came in, he was probably one of them players who wouldn't really cared if we let go, but he's took the bull by the horns. He's bought into the system. He's a first pick. Bernabeu obviously took time to settle in, even though he played well yesterday. It's all the signs for me are pointed to him being a vital member of the Celtic team at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, I love the stats from Stuart, so thanks for that. I think the more advanced we go, the better we get a picture, because we do it. It's like when you're trying to understand the importance to the team, just the ones that Stuart's saying about sort of progressing the ball. That's important. Do you know what I mean? Really important to the team. But there's also, so if you look at, it's interesting when you're watching the game. Yeah, Taylor does look exposed because of that pace. When you're up against another level. And on one hand, you could say, actually, Taylor looks exposed, but he's one of our best players so far this season. So you're like, but is that just maybe it's different position, or is maybe Taylor? Yeah, he's exposed, but he will learn in the Champions League. Like he's the most improved player at the club. Do you know what I mean the way he's improved right through the sort of Lennon years? You know what I mean as well. He's improved every year. So, and there's one that I didn't rate, but I just love him more and more because it just, you see that improvement, that the leadership, the desire to win as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of the ones where, yeah, he could be exposed, but maybe that was just against who he was up against that night. I know. I think Juco James was talking about that before, about actually the Leipzig game right at the start, like Taylor's going to be up against the speed of their forwards. So, but no, I think he's improved, and we just need to continue involved. It's a journey. So Ange has took us on that journey last year with the league. This is year 2 of retaining it. And then in the Champions League's just just learning as well. Do you know what I mean? So,
I think it's
sorry, Stephen, just on that, the stylistic bit, and how it's important to us about the build up and take it progressive in Taylor. and I'm not wanting to jump against Stuart said onto yesterday, but Haksabanovic, I know, and I agree, Bernabeu was one of the standout players, but Haksabanovic, not just because he performed well, but just offering something different and something missing in that role, as the sort of O'Reilly role, but offering something different there. And I had some stats, but we'll not talk about them, but because of that game. But yeah, I think just looking at how the team can develop, not so much the individual player, but how that individual stats can help the team develop. I think Haksabanovic was a real find in that position yesterday.
Yeah, I thought he performed well in that number 10 role, to be honest with you, Tony. He definitely did offer something different. He was drifting, like in a free roam kind of role.
I done that on my sort of match report about how O'Reilly was mostly in the right when he's played in that position, where Haksabanovic was on the left, he was on the right. Even his accuracy at 91% in that position was that's really high in the amount of passes. So I think that's interesting to see that we've found that little bit of something different to help the team.
Yeah, 100%. We are an hour in, fellas, so we'll round off the podcast, and I'll come to you, Stuart, first. Have you enjoyed it, buddy?
Yeah, no, it's been good.
Good, man. Brought some cracking stats there, like all them stats bomb and Y Scout, like unbelievable. And Tony, yourself, buddy, did you enjoy this one?
Yeah, I loved it. I just want to say, I know you don't like my pessimism, Stephen. That's just because I'm a wee bit older and just trying to be a bit balanced. But
we're maybe not a good combination then.
I predicted. I do the wee preview for 20-minute Tims, and I predicted for the Leipzig game a 3-1 scoreline for Leipzig. So I got that right with my pessimism. But my prediction for this one in the 20 minutes preview is that the 2-1 offered for Celtic for a home win is what I would be saying is value. I think as much as we're up against the good team and we dropped off, I think we're at home, and if we can continue that performance in that first 55 and get a goal at home, then I still think it's a hard game, but I think the bookmakers might have given a bit of value there at 2-1 Celtic.
Yeah, and as always, bet responsibly, folks. Thanks for throwing that one in, Tony. To kind of take the show on a different turn before we end, I wish Frank McGarvey and his family well in his battle with cancer. We're all behind you, and I wish everyone well involved in that. Family, friends, and Celtic Football Club. But until next time, which will be 2 weeks again, hopefully a Thursday. But if it's a Sunday, who cares? StatsDrop will be back, and I think we'll have maybe 3 games to talk about this time. So strap in. There'll be more XG chat, more XA chat. It'll be brilliant. But until then, stay well and keep safe. Hail, hail.